Welcome to Block and Order, the show that explores the legal issues facing the world of Web3. I'm Kyle Lawrence, and with me, as always, he's my friend and yours, and he will correct you if you say Frankenstein instead of Frankenstein's monster, Moish Peltz.
It's Frankenstein. It's not Frankenstein's monster. Hey,
It's
Kyle.
Frankenstein's monster. That's insane.
I know, that is insane. That's just completely wrong.
I was complimenting you. You should correct people when they say that nonsense. How are you? How was your Thanksgiving?
My Thanksgiving was fantastic. I saw a lot of family, ate lots of food, did a second Thanksgiving leftover session. How about you?
That's good. It was great. It's actually my favorite holiday of the year because it revolves around eating and sitting around. And it's also the only time for this time of year in the fourth quarter where I can take 2 days off in a row. So it holds a very special place in my heart. And of course, I did have relatives ask me, what's up with the Bitcoin, which is a question that I always love. So I'm sure you got that too a couple of times.
Definitely got some what's up with the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
What is Binance?
Are you still doing the Bitcoin?
Still doing the Bitcoin. Yeah. And I tell them, and they get that disappointed glaze over their eyes, you know.
That's good. And they just turn away. That's for the best. If they turn away after you answer them, that's for the best. Because then they'll be like, "Well, hey, can you manage if I give you $1,500, can you invest it for me?" It's like, I don't know.
Oh no, we're not doing that. We're way beyond taking Aunt Peggy's pocket change and flushing it down the drain.
See, I knew you were a smart man. Well, Moish, why don't you kick us off? What's going on in the world of Web3 today?
Well, so speaking of Binance, I think the biggest news story since our last episode is the pleading guilty by CZ Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of Binance, as well as him announcing that he is stepping down as CEO. Additionally, Binance agreed to pay $4.3 billion with a B in penalties to settle the long-running Department of Justice investigation, as well as a related CFTC investigation. The DOJ alleged that Binance essentially turned a blind eye to any global sanctions obligations they may have had, including servicing places such as Iran, Cuba, Syria, Russia-occupied Ukraine, Crimea, Donbass, etc. So, CZ has pled guilty. He's now going to be sentenced. It's unclear where exactly he's going to stay in the interim, but that's all being worked out in the process. But, going forward, Kyle, what do you think of, this announcement, and what do you think of how this impacts, more generally the consequences of I guess the largest exchange in the world for crypto is now, this is the result.
Well, it's a very interesting set of circumstances. It's not that unexpected. I mean, SEC sued Binance back in June, with some of these allegations that you referenced before. And $4.3 billion, it's a lot of money. Don't come at me in the comments. I'm not saying that it's not, but in the grand scheme of things, that's like a year of revenues for them. It's not shutting them down completely, and they still get to keep all the money that they've made.
A day of trading volume. I don't know if it's a year,
right? I mean, theoretically, and while it does end the investigations by the Department of Justice and the CFTC, as you mentioned, there is still a possibility that the SEC can levy some further penalties upon them. What's interesting to me is that the complaint specifically says that while Binance lacked basic safeguards, end quote, to protect against certain bad actors, there's nothing alleged that they actually misused the assets of their customers. And to me, we get back to this idea that, where's that line drawn? Are we in Minority Report? Do they actually have to do something wrong in order for these fines to be levied? I mean, Moish, I don't know if I don't want to be an idealist, but at what point do we say, hey, you actually have to do something wrong before you face a penalty of this magnitude?
Yeah, I do think, the settlement to me shows that there was some acknowledgement that things have to change. And I don't know if this is just, I think there's a few different theories floating around there about, one, why did CZ do this? Was it better to just kind of walk in the door, give up, avoid really, really long, potential criminal penalties, etc. Or just, seems like the one of the reports was, maybe 18 months in jail would be kind of like
Right.
the long term. So maybe that's just a way that he can just, him personally can close this chapter of whatever investigations may have been ongoing and whatever bad activity, may have happened. I do think it's also interesting that, it is the largest exchange with the most volume, the deepest markets.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to have a monitor, it's court ordered monitor that's going to come in for the next 3 years and basically implement a real sanctions program. We'll see what that means and how it's implemented and what that results in terms of all the different jurisdictions that the Binance.com entity services. But I certainly think that's going to mean some real changes in the way they do business and the way that a lot of customers interact with Binance.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is definitely like, if this is part of crypto growing up and the professionalization of these exchanges is, well, yeah, they need a sanctions program. Right. Yeah, they can't be laundering money for sanctioned regimes. That's the US point of view, right? So I think the crypto point of view is this is permissionless and they're stateless and they can live wherever they want. And you're seeing, when those two philosophies run up against each other, I think right now there's a clear winner.
The unstoppable force against the immovable object, right? It's who's going to blink first. Coinbase's token though was up 75% the last 30 days after this.
There you go.
So that's interesting. In the news that everybody has heard about, and in some ways it overshadowed what happened with Binance, the insane saga of OpenAI and Sam Altman. I mean, this is just an amazing series of events that happened, and I'm sure we've all heard about what happened. But basically, on November 17th, in something of a shocking twist, Sam Altman was fired by the board over a, quote, lack of transparency. And purportedly, Microsoft had hired him. Just hours later, Microsoft, of course, had committed up to $13 billion of capital to support OpenAI. And then a couple days later, that was on a Friday, and then on Monday, November 20th, it was reported that hundreds of OpenAI employees had threatened to quit if Sam Altman was not reinstated. And then 2 days later, he was reinstated along with a new board altogether. It's not entirely known what exactly happened. There's a lot of theories floating around out there. A couple of things that I had seen in the immediate aftermath of this was the board was concerned that Sam Altman was moving so fast and was not taking some of the moral implications of the technology, keeping it in mind as he was making these decisions and pushing the technology forward, which to me opens a whole world of idealist platitudes about what is the role of this technology and what are the roles of corporate boards. But my God, considering the chaos around the firing in the space, do you think that rehiring him is better for AI safety? Do you think that there's more in play here? What are your immediate thoughts? We could go on about this for days. It's unbelievable what happened.
Well, they didn't rehire him. Nothing happened. You blinked your eyes and it's back at the status quo.
It's unbelievable.
They were going to raise $83 billion at an $83 billion valuation. Yeah. And then you blink your eyes, the company's worth zero, and you open your eyes again, it's worth $83 billion again. Great. It's the private markets here. If you don't think about the mark to market, then nothing happens. So yeah, look, I think we'll have to wait and see as to what concerns the board had about his lack of transparency and whether there's any meat to that bone. I know one of the things that came out is there is that the next model beyond GPT-4 that they're working on, I think it's called Q Star. Sounds like based on what they've done in the pre-training, it's just way more powerful. And so there's concerns about, what are we about to unleash on the world here? And that may have been what the board was thinking, or just maybe the way he handled it. We don't know, right?
Right.
I think the other question is, and this kind of leads back to the FTX case, is there's a common thread here of effective altruism. And, I just question, how this at OpenAI and how whatever happened at FTX, there's a lot of leaders in these organizations that are very adamant and prominent members of the effective altruism movement.
Right.
And, does that volatility in these organizations reflect upon that philosophy, or is this just kind of just random chatter?
Right. Yeah. Well, this, interestingly about this is a, nonprofit board of a capped profit entity is I think how they're technically classified. And the employees who were, you know, screaming from the rafters that Sam Altman needed to be reinstated. Surely it had nothing to do with the tender offer that was on the table to buy their shares for a lot of money. Tyler Cohen, who's a personal hero, I think, of both of ours, he talks about, I'm just going to quote him, it's NPO, nonprofit organizations. NPO directors are mostly ill-informed, quarrelsome, clueless about their proper role, and dominated by the CEO, as proponents of shareholder primacy would predict. I can't say it any better than that. Thank you, Tyler.
But it's a nonprofit board with a cap profit company, as we always see. That's just how things work these days, right?
The day that ends in Y.
So turning to a non, that was a, I guess, non-DAO nonprofit, whatever. Turning to some DAO organizational issues, and this kind of calls back to our last episode with Carla Reyes. Aragon DAO members unanimously voted to file a lawsuit against the Aragon Association, the DAO's founders. So here we have a DAO basically voting to sue itself. Now, in corporate law, we see this all the time. You see shareholders of for-profit companies. Yeah, derivative suit. That's what they call it. Hey, he spoiled the surprise.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got excited.
But, this is, I think, really fascinating to see in the context of a DAO, is the DAO is voting to fund a lawsuit with DAO funds in order to pursue a claim of the DAO members against the DAO founders.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really fascinating development. I don't know if this case has been discussed too prominently out there, but, Kyle, I'm just wondering, if you've seen kind of weird derivative lawsuits that may track this, at least from some sort of analogy. Right. And then just, how should we think about DAOs now voting to pursue legal actions against, basically the other members or founders or whatever it may be?
Sure. Well, I think this is really fascinating. I love this story because to me, it presents a beacon of hope for DAO governance structures going forward. I mean, in the past couple of weeks, we've talked about with Carla Reyes, in particular, are DAOs dead? Is this model of governance not going to work? And here, I think this is exactly what DAOs should be doing, holding their leaders accountable. I'm not saying that they're right or wrong for this, but this is exactly the kind of thing that these people should be doing. The issue at hand was, I think the founders were trying to dissolve the treasury, and they were going to redeem people's tokens for Ether, but they were going to keep a large delta for themselves, allegedly. And the token holders unanimously passed the resolution to, one, sue them to stop them from doing it. They didn't unanimously pass using the treasury to fund the lawsuit, which is funny, but that's a topic for another day. But I love that the people are utilizing the governance protocols that DAOs were created to enforce. They're using the tools that have been bestowed upon them. I think this is really fascinating. It's really interesting to see how this plays out. It's a shame that this is not getting more attention, but just, with the two topics we previously talked about, I don't think that it's just going to garner a lot of front page headlines. But you as a litigator, I'd be curious to see, or curious to get your thoughts on, where do they go from here? What will be the next steps? Because if they're not willing to fund it, how will this actually get funded? I mean, it seems like the founders aren't out of options here. I don't know.
Well, I think that's a very traditional business problem, is like everyone wants to sue someone to get back what they feel is rightfully theirs. But, where does the money come from? Who's bankrolling that operation?
Right.
Litigation is famously expensive and difficult and time intensive. And on top of that, you need someone to really spearhead that litigation from a, inside the DAO perspective. Like, who's going to be the client representative here and help make strategic decisions for this? It's really fascinating from from that perspective. Apparently the law firm that they ended up are planning to hire as part of the proposal has actually sued DAOs before. So are taking on a lawsuit, I think, analogous to this. I'm not sure how the result went on that one, but I think it's really interesting to kind of this thing we'll be tracking and seeing how it moves forward. And I think it's also something that DAOs should be thinking about planning for, both in the formation and in the operational, as preparing for and preventing against lawsuits, or making it so that if there is a dispute, it can be resolved in one of several ways, which may be more beneficial than everyone just taking out their bazookas and suing each other.
Right. Mutually assured destruction works every time. What can I say?
Every time except the last time, I guess.
Right, exactly. Right. Yes, that's true. On to another bit of unsurprising news. November 20th, the SEC had charged Kraken with operating its trading platform as an unregistered securities exchange, broker-dealer, and clearing agency. The suit was filed in federal court in San Francisco, and the SEC's complaint alleges that Kraken's business practices, deficient internal controls, and poor record-keeping practices present a range of risks for its customers. The complaint alleges specifically that Kraken commingles its customers' money with its own, including paying operational expenses directly from accounts that hold customer cash. Kraken allegedly commingles customers' crypto assets with its own, creating what its own auditor had identified as a, quote, significant risk of loss to its customers. And this, again, comes from the director of SEC's Division of Enforcement and our favorite head of Slytherin House, Gerber Gruhl, again, making an appearance on B&O. Good to see you again, Gerber. This one's
You're welcome on the show if you'd like to join us.
Please, open invitation. We would love to have you on. Again, this is part. So here I'm gonna be a hypocrite, because I think this is also some Minority Report level nonsense where they didn't actually necessarily do anything wrong, but commingling funds is actually pretty bad. It's something we see a lot of in corporate law, where you're taking in money and using it to pay for your car and your kids' braces, and that's a big no-no in the crypto world. So Moish, the sort of anticipated question I would throw to you is, it seems like everybody's breaking the rules, but there's no rule book. So, what does it say about the current state of regulation when Kraken is again seemingly just swimming in these shark-infested waters with no life raft?
Well, look, in an ideal world, exchanges would self-regulate and would hold themselves to a very high standard, recognizing that, custodying client funds is a big responsibility, and they have certain obligations to do that. I think if you were to ask Kraken, they would probably say that they're doing that, or they believe they're doing that. And you saw they had a very forceful response to this lawsuit along those lines. And I do think it is unfair that you're holding them to a standard of which there is none. But, I think at the end of the day, if there's going to be regulation, it's going to apply most obviously and most forcefully to centralized exchanges operating in the US. Now, the problem is we're just not getting that legislation anytime soon.
Right.
And what do you do in the meantime? Well, the SEC seems to think that the answer is just to start enforcement actions and to continue down this warpath, which I think everyone agrees is not really effective. I think you saw, Binance is we just talked earlier in the show, is handling DOJ allegations with settlements and with criminal penalties and et cetera, et cetera. But these SEC suits just don't seem to make sense, or to position the cases in a way that there's really any, there's like, what's the outcome? What does the SEC want here?
Right.
How can they comply? And there's really no answer there.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. This is the DOJ. They're saying, hey, nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants to pay a $4 billion fine.
Yeah.
But that's an outcome that's realistic and feasible and possible.
Yeah.
You're not seeing that reaction to these SEC suits, because I just don't think there's a way to resolve them in a way which is favorable for the companies.
Right. It's almost like the SEC and Gary Gensler are, they're the White Walkers, and Gary Gensler's the Night King. And it's just, nobody knows when he's going to pop up or what he really wants. He's this sort of existential threat who just sort of appears and kills everybody, but he disappears.
Sounds like a Halloween movie.
I wish we could get an image of him just popping up on the screen with his face, like doing the spoiler alert, by the way. Raising the dead.
All right. So next topic, Tether and OKX are collaborating with the DOJ. And as we just mentioned, our friends, our reasonable friends over at the DOJ, have decided to partner here to allow the DOJ to seize $225 million of USDT, which is the largest ever freezing of USDT. This was related to a reported human trafficking syndicate that was located in Southeast Asia that was conducting pig butchering scams. Now, if you're not aware, pig butchering scams are this pernicious scam where mom and pop crypto owners and grandmothers and et cetera are sending their life savings to people thinking that they're either going to get back their investment tenfold or they're part of some love scam. And it's really difficult for law enforcement and for victims and for just other private parties to investigate these things. So I think this is a huge win that DOJ was able to seize such a large amount of funds, or at least to freeze them, facilitated by blockchain analytics or Chainalysis and other private assistance. And so, Kyle, what are your thoughts on this type of private regulation occurring here? I don't know if this is private regulation, maybe public regulation, DOJ getting involved in some of this seizing of illicit funds,
Sure.
et cetera.
Well, this is an example of regulation gone right, and you're talking about pig butchering. It's a really terrible thing that happens a lot. The Wall Street Journal has had a long, multi-part series, about it over the past weeks, and some of the stories that you hear about these people who lose their entire life savings, to these scams. It's really heartbreaking stuff. It's really terrible. So I do applaud Tether for taking the affirmative step and working with DOJ here. You'd like to see more of this and less of the sort of proactive, we're shutting you down because you could do something wrong. This is actually somebody doing something wrong, Tether being responsible and doing something about it. It's not the first time that Tether has taken these steps. They've done things like this, over the past year. But it's interesting. Like, I don't know how well equipped the DOJ is to handle these things on a larger scale. I mean, 225 million, again, I'm not poo-pooing the dollar amount, but it's couch change, compared to some of the greater scams and greater problems that exist with respect to this. I wonder how equipped the DOJ is to handle these investigations. That they're a US based agency. How far is their reach? I honestly don't know. Do you think that there needs to be some sort of task force, between the DOJ and the other regulatory bodies and partnering with other countries in order to attack these types of issues?
Yeah, I mean, there definitely needs to be international cooperation among law enforcement, among various crypto actors that have visibility into these types of schemes. But yeah, it's a great point, right? $225 million, certainly a lot of money, but how many of these schemes are there that
Right.
there's 10, 20, 50, $100 million? There's probably thousands of them. So how do you develop an effective deterrence to people continuing to do these scams when they're obviously so lucrative? And how do you, as law enforcement, scale up to meet
Right.
that need, to help? So I don't know if it's a solvable problem. But
right. And beyond that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but beyond that, it's when you get the regulatory agencies, they take these steps and they do these things, the scammers adapt. They're very good at adapting. They're much better at adapting than the agencies are at adapting to what they're doing. It's, I hate to use the word impressive, but they move very quickly with respect to these things. So I just hope that they can continue down the path of shutting these things down.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Last up on the docket today, Bullish, a crypto exchange run by former New York Stock Exchange president Tom Farley, bought Coindesk in an all-cash deal. Terms of the deal were not fully disclosed, which is not uncommon, but Digital Currency Group, which is the parent of Coindesk, originally bought the publication for $500,000 in 2016. Coindesk is a wonderful publication that anybody in Web3 knows and loves. It's a site I check every day. They're great. Great journalists there, and it's really where I get a lot of my information. Just the morning news. People at the Times, I have Coindesk. Coindesk reportedly generates annual revenues of about $50 million. So you can use that to sort of ballpark where the deal ended up. Bullish, interestingly, is backed by, among other people, Peter Thiel's Founders Fund. And Bullish is also in the running to buy FTX out of bankruptcy. They're one of the 3 potential suitors for that. So going forward, Coindesk will effectively act as a subsidiary, an independent subsidiary with its own editorial board of Bullish. Now, Moish, what's interesting about that is here you have a crypto exchange buying a media company, a prominent media company, one that is well respected and one that we all love. You and I know people who work there. What are the ethical concerns here? Is there any moral soup going on with an exchange having its own media arm like this?
Yeah, look, if you were to ask the editorial group at Coindesk, they would say, of course, no, we're editorially independent and etc. However, I think it's hard to get around the fact that, Bullish is not an extremely well-known exchange. I presume part of their plans here are to increase their media profile. And, as they start ramping up advertising and entering the US market and trying to get more consumers, wouldn't it be nice if we had, right? So I don't know if that's actually what's going on or any of what their plans are, but how do you avoid the implication of that? And then the question is for Coindesk, if they're covering Bullish and things they're doing, how do they maintain that editorial independence? I think there's always going to be that cloud around their coverage of them, right? And I think Coindesk very famously, had the most prominent article that I think led to the downfall of FTX. One of the dominoes that fell, and how would that have shook out differently if Coindesk was a wholly owned subsidiary of FTX?
It's a phenomenal point. And you'd like to think,
right, nothing would have changed. They would have reported it just the same way. But how do you know that? I guess you can't. But it does kind of raise questions about the state of the crypto media. I think there's some really, really exceptional journalists that work in the space. But I think part of the whole industry maturing is it's going to be the media kind of maturing along with it. Our hope, you and me, Kyle, I think is to play some very, very small role in that. But one of our favorite podcasts, Bankless, just this week kind of got into a spat over, there's Bankless HQ, there's the Bankless DAO, they're different independent organizations. Apparently, I did not know that. I guess I knew there was a DAO, and I knew the DAO wasn't the same as the thing, but I didn't think about it being completely independent. But there was a spat, and there was a publicity issue between the two. And so it's like, well, is this a media organization, or is this a DAO, or is it both, or is it both but separate but equal somehow? How does that work? It's also an interesting IP question, right, from that perspective. But I think part of this is the coverage of crypto by traditional media hasn't always been great. I think a lot of crypto media has been doing a really, really fantastic job, but there are some of the more prominent institutions in crypto that are now kind of running into unforced errors in some respects. Mm-hmm. And so it'd just be interesting to see how this plays out and how the media coverage continues to improve from here.
One thing that was just on a quick end note, the picture when they announced the acquisition of Tom Farley, the former president of the New York Stock Exchange, he looked like the ultimate finance bro. And I mean that as a compliment. He was wearing a suit and a tie with a vest and a hood. And I was like, that guy, he gets it. Nice. Fantastic.
That's what we need. More suit, ties,
I love
hoodies. Yeah, that's great.
Well, Moish, that about wraps it up for this week's episode of Block and Order. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Please like and subscribe if you like the content. It really helps us out. Special thank you to producer Chris. Without him, we could not make this episode possible. Remember that nothing contained herein is meant to be construed as legal advice or investment advice. Please consult your own advisors and attorneys if you're going to take the plunge down the rabbit hole. I'm Kyle Lawrence.
And I'm Moish Peltz. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.